Hello, genealogists. It's Craig with Just Genealogy in another one of those remote sessions. At this very moment, I am probably halfway to North Carolina on Interstate 95, physically, not virtually. So soon I will be able to get back into my own office, my own hardware, my own everything to start having fun again. Not that I'm not having fun, but I was just having a conversation with someone near and dear, and she was unable to find a land deed, and it's a colonial land deed. And it dawned on me that a lot of people forget that there is something called a first deed, and there's something called a patent, and there's something called a deed. So when you have a deed where you can find that land has been sold, but you can't find where it actually was purchased, there are a couple of things that can be going on. One, it was purchased so far back in history by some relative, and through the process of inheritance, it came to that person, which means you have to do the genealogy and track it all the way back, which might be the reason why you can't find it, is because it came in through a wife. That's a possibility, and you don't know the maiden name of that wife, so you don't know to look for that land. And what I would do there is pay attention to who the neighbors are, and then track the neighbor's land. In other words, do the neighborhood around your land and see how the neighborhood changes, and then look to the deeds of those neighbors and see who their neighbors are, and does your piece of land, does it change hands and you just can't find it, or some sort of clue about what the maiden name might have been of that woman you've been hunting for years and can't find because it just happens to be unknown to you. But the more common reason, especially in the colonial period in the East, for why you can't find a deed is because there isn't one. Because when the government sells someone land, it's not a deed, it's a patent. And the system for patents is entirely different than the system for deeds. So what you want to do is go to the general land office, the land office for the colony, the land office for the state, depending on the time period, and look to see if you can find a patent in that surname, in that name, for that piece of land. So you may be able to find the patent, and then that person sells the land to someone. When that someone sells the land, that's when you get a deed. Now, there are circumstances when somebody will come in and create a deed because of a courthouse fire or something like that, so they can establish ownership to the land. And that may be a deed that's based on a patent, and they may do that. I don't think I've ever seen that, but conceptually, I think that's very possible. So let's back up a little bit. So if you have a deed where someone has sold land to someone else, being the grantor, the owner of the land, the O in the grantor means owner. The grantee is the person getting the land. GE, getting. That's how I remember it. O means owner. E means getting, as in GE. Then you want to see if first you try to trace back the family and the land and that kind of stuff. And sometimes in some jurisdictions, you can find tax lists that you can find where they actually acquired the land. If the tax lists contain the amount of acreage and the description, you may be able to trace the land into other people also. Now, if it's acquired through inheritance, you recognize that those other people have to be relatives of some sort. So you want to figure that out. You always want to figure out the relationship between somebody who is selling somebody land, especially if they're selling them the land at a reduced price. But that's really not germane to this conversation. This conversation is about being sure to look for a patent when you're unable to find a deed if it's in the colonial period or the post-Revolutionary War period. If it's in a place where the government is selling land. Now, don't forget, you have state governments that can sell land, they can grant land, and you have the federal government that can grant land. So this might very well happen also in the public domain, where you find a deed, but you can't find that acquiring of that deed, acquiring of that land, and it might very well be a patent. Just a thought, just something to think about. I also want to remind you that whenever you're dealing with land, you should always do an in and out table. I would love to see samples of people's in and out tables. Mine's pretty simple, and I'm sure I could add more stuff to it. And maybe one day we'll talk about it. But if you all would send me copies of your in and out tables, I could probably distill them down into some super in and out table. And what's an in and out table? Well, an in and out table is when somebody acquires land, you put it in the table, the acreage, the description, who they got it from, what deed book and page it's found on, what year, the date, those kind of things. And then when it is sold, you take it out of the in and out table. Now, you don't take it out from the perspective of removing it from the table. You put it in a separate column with all that information, so that when you get down to the bottom of all the ins and all the outs, they balance. And if they don't balance, you want to ask the question, well, why don't they balance? Now, if they're like an acre off or something like that, you're really not going to worry about it from the perspective of it could be a rounding error, unless you've got a purchase of an acre there, which is very possible, especially in a town lot or something like that. So basically, the in and out table accounts for all the land that there ever was attached to a person or a family or a surname. You can have a big in and out table, or you can have a small in and out table. It's all a function of how many land transactions there are. For every purchase, there should be a sale. For every sale, there should be a purchase. And you should be able to equalize them down the spreadsheet. Excel works fine. Paper works fine too. So 2 concepts today. 1, look for a land patent if you can't find a deed. 2, always create an in and out table. And if you would send me copies of your in and out tables, you know where my email is in the description. I'll talk to you about them and see how we can improve them, or see how you can help me improve mine. So this has been Craig with Just Genealogy, with another on the fly, just chat here at Just Genealogy, until I can get back into the swing of things. Thank you so much.